Since we're doing horror and we have like, what, 2-3 weeks more to go, I wanted to cover as much ground as possible, so I asked my employers to find 4 anime in categories I mentioned previously. Mayonnaise was the existential one, so now we're onto short shit. I'm actually kinda surprised they've decided to give me Warau Salesman instead of more popular Yamishibai, but honestly, it's for the best, cause just like Baconaise has all of the problems with existential horror anime, Japanese Cabbage Stories has all the problems associated with short horror stories, in that it's barely scary, the characters are unlikable, stupid, or both, and the culmination is usually a painfully prolonged jump scare sequence. With Warau Salesman, I can actually show how these sorts of stories should be done, as well as why making better graphics was a mistake. So let's begin. Warau Salesman New is something in between a continuation and a remake of Warau Salesman, a very popular and very old anime made in the early 90s. Our main protagonist is Moguro Fukuzo, a quote-unquote salesman whose job is to make your wishes a reality as long as you follow his instructions to the letter. The moment you stop doing that, you're fucked, because in case of what I said previously wasn't a good enough of a hint, Mr. Moguro is pretty much the devil, only instead of fulfilling your wishes for souls, he does it essentially for fun. The old Warau Salesman is actually a pretty good horror thriller anime, the same way why Edgar Allan Poe's stories are considered to be the grandfather of literary horror. The scary part is not the gore or the monsters, the scare comes from you realizing how fucked up the situation is. Under the guise of helping people, Moguro exploits their character flaws, resulting in pretty macabre situations of suffering and sometimes outright murder, but the genius part about it is that Moguro rarely convinces people to hurt themselves. He merely gives them tools to do so and watches what happens next. If the client's wish is relatively harmless, the ending won't be as bad, but if the person in question is also a jerk who thinks he could cheat the system, he is in for a very rough awakening. The format of the short story also plays in favor. Because the episode's length is 10 minutes long and most stories are unrelated to each other, the viewer doesn't have to watch everything or even watch it in order to get the gist of the show. This can be a curse in disguise, however, as the common problem for this genre is that the episodes are so interchangeable that if you've saw one episode of it, you've pretty much seen them all. The fact that there is 100 or something episodes of this, and that it was made in late 80s, early 90s, means graphics-wise it won't impress the new generation. In fact, those who grew up on stuff like Attack on Titan will find the graphics to be pretty dated or pacing too slow. Meanwhile, New Salesman is a 12-episode anime, each episode over 24 minutes long, but it has 2 separate stories, each 10-11 minutes long, so it's pretty much the same. The premise is also pretty much the same, albeit a bit modernized, and the graphics are made up to modern standards. So now men mostly look like men, and women look like women, instead of men looking like blow-up dolls, and women looking like blow-up dolls, or like men. 90s was much simpler times, if you really think about it. However, I personally think that the graphical update made the show worse, because alongside updated graphics came everything else modern anime has, for better or worse. The biggest offender of this would be the music, mainly the opening and the ending. Now on itself they're not that bad, quite the opposite in fact, but the problem is that the old show didn't have that. In fact, it had only 2 tracks that are used in the new show as well, so to a person who knows or watched the original, this all looks like unnecessary padding. The next thing is very subjective, but I also don't like Moguro's new voice actor. The old one's voice was very deep, calm and collected, while the new one is only a bit higher, but it's very noticeable in comparison, and that, along with his mannerisms, for some reason strikes me the wrong way. Admittedly, the voice of Japanese Mace Windu can't really compete with the voice of Japanese Darth Vader, so I might be biased. The other thing the graphical update kinda ruined is Moguro himself. Now, anyone who watched more than 2 episodes knows that he's not a normal salesman, but in horror of this sort, the biggest challenge is to make him seem normal. Obvious paranormal things should never be obvious, otherwise you're ruining the suspense. In the old one, the only thing strange about Moguro is his obvious looks and the fact that his boom has obviously given someone an epileptic seizure. The new show does everything it can to show us that Moguro is clearly the devil, which combined with his mannerisms in most of the episodes makes him look like he directly and intentionally wants to ruin his client's life. This downgrades the client's role in his own downfall and makes it look as if everything was staged, and thus boring to watch. So yeah, I think that Old Salesman is superior, but besides the things I've already mentioned, it's a pretty good example of a short horror story that doesn't rely on jump scares or gore to get its message across. If you want a direct comparison, try watching old episode 51 and the first part of new episode 2. Those 2 are the same thing, and comparing them will help you decide which version is the best for you. What? Not everything I say has to end with a joke.